Story 1. When a wife emailed me an 8-paragraph email with zip files attached outlining the 2-year affair my girlfriend and her husband had been caught in. It was fascinating to see pictures, texts, and videos of their actions, including scheduling time when I was at work. Story 2. When she punched me hard and when I asked her what made her so angry, she said, "That's how I usually get angry, and everyone knows it. You don't even understand me." So I stopped understanding. Story 3. When my girlfriend started college, I would visit her every 2 weeks. I didn't have a car, so I would buy an $80 Greyhound bus ticket, and it took roughly 6 hours to get there. She would always meet me at the bus stop, but one time, about 3 months later, she wasn't there. I walked 20 minutes to her dorm. She wasn't there. This was 2003, and she didn't have a cell phone. I walked all the way back to the bus stop. She wasn't there either. So I just waited at the bus stop for another hour, and she finally showed up. Her excuse was she went to a party and forgot that I was coming this week. After I got home, I broke up with her. She was with another guy the same night. Story 4. My on-again, off-again girlfriend ran into my apartment to grab her clothes and miscellaneous items she kept at my place. She then proceeded to pick up the puppy and hold her over the balcony, similar to how Michael Jackson did. It was a third-floor apartment. She threatened to drop the dog, but I kept talking and pleading with her to give me the dog back. She finally did, and my neighbor actually called the police and she was arrested. Story 5. When a friend of mine committed suicide, she just wasn't interested in what I was feeling about it. She had better things to do than listen to me try and talk about my friend or how upset I was. It destroyed me that the person I thought cared about me more than anyone else couldn't even find 5 minutes out of her day to talk to me. Story 6. The first time I ever mentioned that I was thinking about leaving her, she essentially dared me to do it and said she would ruin my life. Took me 7 months to get out of that situation. Story 7. When she said, "My family and I will destroy you if you decide to leave," that told me all I needed to know. That relationship was never about love. I was just fuel. It actually made the decision easier and was like a weight lifted off my soul when I physically separated. Story 8. She came to me 11 days after the birth with papers showing that the little boy was some other dude's son. Her ex's son. Conceived back in January of this year. Story 9. When I confronted her about ditching me to hang out with her friends, she basically told me, "Family, friends, and work will always be more of a priority than you." Which made me realize that she didn't really love me. She just found me to be convenient when she had downtime. Story 10. She got exposed to COVID-19 at the prison where she worked, and instead of quarantining, she went out clubbing downtown. I stayed in to quarantine. Her friend Mystery has a boyfriend named Darren of 3 years who met up with her and her other friend at a bar. Her friend who went out with her had her dad pick her up 5 minutes later because she lost her license from a DUI stemming from a prostitution charge. So it was just her and Darren. He bought her shots, then walked her home, hung out, and ate at her place. He tried to stay over and sleep in her bed. She said she told him no, and he left. All I asked was, "What would you say if I did all of that and told you I made the other person leave?" The question bounced right off her. That was pretty much the end of that. Kim, if you were out there reading this, you were some trash. Laughing my ass off. Story 11. Second rehabilitation. When she came home and showed me the power and control wheel of the Duluth model and then told me she could call the police at any moment saying I was an abuser, and they would believe her. Then she proved it. That's the moment I knew it was over as a relationship. Story 12. It wasn't when she cheated on me. It was 8 weeks later, after she'd broken the boundaries we had agreed on but had generally been trying to make things right, and when we were having a date night, the first since the event. I made spaghetti, we watched a romantic comedy, we went through the motions of making love, and we went to sleep. I realized the next morning that I would never heal, and that she wasn't going to change. The whole evening before, I didn't feel sad, guilty, anxious, or anything. I felt nothing. I got home from work, we broke up, we cried over it, and I sent her home. Story 13. When they said they would kill themselves by jumping in front of a train if I ever broke up with them, and that it would be my fault. So I did exactly that. They did not, in fact, kill themselves. To anyone who is out there and still stuck in this situation, you should get out as soon as you can. Please. It will never end unless you decide to end it. It's not an easy decision sometimes, but you will regret wasting your time with this person in the future. If you are worried that they actually will do it, then take it seriously and call emergency services, or make sure they are with family or friends. But cut them out of your life as soon as you can because they will keep trying to get you back. It is manipulative and abusive behavior. Story 14. Had a friend with benefits admit to me she has human papillomavirus after we had already had unprotected sex multiple times. It was really rough. She started full-blown crying in the parking lot of the gas station after she told me. She said she felt dirty and didn't want me to leave her because of it. I just wanted to calm her down, so I was very supportive in the moment. We had to get back to a party at my buddy's place. So I buy her some cigarettes, and when I get back in the car, she's calm and composed and proceeded to tell me she doesn't actually have human papillomavirus and she just wanted to see how I would react. Nope. Fun bonus fact. We have mutual friends, and at another party she gave me some ecstasy while I was drunk and tried to sleep with me again. I felt so bad the next day. Turns out it wasn't ecstasy, it was methamphetamine. Edit. Drunk me definitely willingly took the ecstasy/methamphetamine. I just didn't regain consciousness until the morning. So as bad as she is, she didn't drug me against my will as a lot of you are assuming. I also made bad choices. Story 15. I hated when she took her cell phone and looked at it while I was talking, giving me just short answers, not even paying any attention to me. Hated it. We had an argument over that. I was quite mad. The storm settled after a few minutes, and as I was talking for 30 seconds, the first thing she did was automatically pick up the phone from the table. Naturally, I was the one at fault because she just needed to check for messages and wouldn't give herself time to start thinking about what she could change. It was over in 2 minutes. Story 16. I visited my parents for the weekend. When it was time to leave, I just couldn't help but cry thinking I was going back to our apartment, a place where I'm being hit and belittled every day. I thought it would get better with time, but this day I just snapped, and all the sadness I put aside overflowed. I realized it was wrong, and I decided to leave her. Best decision I've ever made in my life. Story 17. We had a really bad public fight, and we both handled it poorly. She started using hard drugs and partying nightly. She wouldn't come up for up to 2 weeks at a time. If she did, it was only for a few minutes before she was gone again. I developed obsessive tendencies trying to be in contact, which cyclically made things worse. When she said she was going to take my pet to her parents for safekeeping, I took everything, put it in storage, and got out that day. I have never contacted her since. Story 18. When she started acting weird and protective about her phone, taking it into the bathroom and flipping it upside down, and her unwillingness to put any effort into our relationship, I realized it was 90-10 for my end. Story 19. Hit me, was jealous of my sister, stole money from me. But my personal favorite was a girl that exclaimed that I was flying off the handle anytime I expressed even the mildest of frustrations. She did this regardless of whether I was frustrated with her, another person, or an object. Story 20. Here's what happened 11 years ago as best as I can remember. We'll call her Lisa. I left home at about 7:15 a.m. to cycle to work. I was only 4 days into a new job at the same company. As far as I was aware, she left for work shortly after. Her commute was longer and more complicated than mine, but it didn't cost her anything. She worked as a childcare assistant and had free travel as a perk from a friend of hers who worked for Transport for London. At about 11 a.m., I switched my phone on and had a lot of voicemail messages from her work and the police asking me if I knew where she was. As she hadn't turned up for work and she wasn't answering her phone, and neither was I called them both back to explain that I didn't know where she was and apologized for having my phone switched off. I called her numerous times over the next couple of hours, as did the police and her work. It just rang and rang. No boy female. She didn't reply to text messages either. The police asked me to check if any of her friends knew where she was. I could only think of one person she used to work with that she was still friends with, so I emailed her. She didn't have many friends as she had trust issues. The police then told me they were going to visit our house at 2 p.m. to check if anyone had broken in and asked if I could be there too, so I started cycling home. About 20 minutes into my ride home, I got a text from her asking why I kept calling and texting her. She didn't understand the gravity of everything that had been going on. She then gave me the first excuse. She told me that a friend of hers, the one I emailed, was feeling suicidal and she rushed to be with her and comfort her. I then rode back to the office after calling the police back. She called them too to explain. My new boss was very understanding and could see how stressed I was. Shortly after I got back to the office, her friend that I emailed responded that she had in fact not seen her and wanted to know if everything was okay. I then called Lisa back to ask what actually happened, to be met with accusations of spying, and she then told me it was in fact a different friend, the one who worked for Transport for London, who was depressed and suicidal and asked her not to tell anyone. Fine. Lisa then told me that she told her work that she was sick and her phone was playing up. But she told the police that she had a domestic issue and couldn't get to her phone. This was probably the worst excuse to give to the police. I got home that night at about 7:30 p.m. and we had a long chat about the day. At about 10 p.m., the police knocked on our door. Initially, she told me not to answer the door. She was paranoid about getting burgled. So I hesitated, not realizing it was the police. So when I did answer, they were suspicious that something else had happened. They asked to speak with her, which they did upstairs. They came down a short while later and left. She then told me the police were okay and she told them she didn't want to press charges. Press charges for what? I sat downstairs for a little while and she went back upstairs to bed. I then went up and told her that I wanted her out of the house as soon as possible. It was over. We'd been together for 5 years and married for 4. I couldn't take any more of her lies. This wasn't the first time I'd caught her lying. She was a compulsive liar. She'd lie about unimportant things that weren't worth lying about. But this was the straw that broke the camel's back. I slept in the spare room, which she should have been sleeping in, really. She moved out 2 months later on a weekend that I was away. When I got back, the house felt very different. It was as if an exorcism had taken place. My life started to improve the very next day. The result is that I was able to start really saving money. I moved to Richmond a year later, met my partner, got a career, had a son, and now a house. If I'd stayed with Lisa, things would never have improved, as I was always broke and sometimes doing 2 jobs just to pay the bills, and I would have been constantly hoping things would get better, which was how much of 2007 and 2008 was spent. TLDR. She failed to turn up for work. Her work reported her missing. She lied to them, me, and the police. She was a compulsive liar. Story 21. My ex hit me in the face about 5 times one night in a drunken rage, and after that, I went to therapy to see how I could stop this from happening. I loved her and didn't want to just leave. Well, the therapist told me that I would either have to leave or go to Alcoholics Anonymous to learn how to cope if I didn't. Things didn't get better, but she didn't hit me again. Fast forward 6 months. It's a Sunday. She gets up, angry about an argument we'd had the night before about her drinking and how I was having second thoughts about marriage, and tells me not to speak to her, gets dressed, and drives off for about 5 hours. Won't answer texts, calls, nothing. So I go about my day, cleaning and such, and she comes home, drunk as always. She was a functional alcoholic, and starts laying into me about this and that thing. I hardly remember now. And it occurred to me, I wasn't having an emotional response. I wasn't angry. I wasn't scared, like I sometimes was when she was like this. I felt nothing. I didn't want to make up. It was over. I felt a weird peace. So I gathered the most important things I owned, right in front of her, and began loading my car. I never went back for the rest. Story 22. When I realized that she wasn't going to work on a career while I was working hard in a job that I hated just so I could earn good money for our future, it hit me that most of my 20s went by without actually having any fun with friends because she didn't want to go out and hang out with them. I gained weight because she didn't want me to go to the gym because I'd look at other women. Edit. Since I kind of worded this poorly and made her look really bad. She was shy, insecure, and didn't really know what to do with herself in terms of a career, so she wasn't even trying. I wasn't perfect either, but I did all I could to help and to show her she was the one for me, but it didn't really help. The relationship caused me many issues with depression, lack of confidence, and the like, but I'm taking it one day at a time. Story 23. When I picked her up while she was drunk, a city away at 5:30 in the morning, on the ride home she detailed her night to me. This included her holding a gun to someone's head after a drug deal went wrong, the fact she was an enforcer for her family's gang, and her mother's association as a girlfriend to the leaders of the local biker gang chapter. I brought her back to my place so she could sleep some of it off. Then I brought her home when she woke up some hours later. Outside of her messaging me 6 months after telling me she had gone to Alcoholics Anonymous for help, I haven't talked to or heard from her since.